All right. Hey, everybody. Thanks for joining. I always love seeing who's sitting in the waiting room before we start this right at the top of the hour. I'm always like, oh, people are excited. They are hanging out, right? Zach, thanks for being here today, bud.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I'll give you a proper introduction and everything as soon as we get into it, but I always like to leave a couple minutes for people to file in here. Let's see, any names that I recognize? Oh, there's my Fireflies AI note taker. I got two today. Sometimes I've got 2 or 3 people like writing all this stuff down. We got Zach Grissom today. Hey Zach, thanks for jumping in, man. I still need to do a GA4 webinar for you. Working on that. I know a lot of people are starting to talk about it. Let's see. Anybody else first time here today that I can shout out? Just drop something in the chat. And as always, if you have any questions, just throw them in the chat at any time and we'll get to them. I think this is going to be a quick one today, but we have some really cool insights that I'm excited to get into, and some interesting kind of like what's working and tips and tricks for using Northbeam on your Google ads, which is something that I think a lot of people could stand to get a lot more out of. I know we have some superstars in here who are doing a great job with their performance media, but tracking your Google ads, understanding where Northbeam helps you with what you're doing in your Google ads as compared to just looking at the Google Ads platform. It's really important distinctions, and it's just another channel to pull levers on that I think you don't usually see people doing both or being masters of both at the same time. So your insight will be really helpful, Zach. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and get into it here. Everybody, if this is your first time here, welcome to the MediaBuyer webinar, where we're going to dive into the latest e-com data powered by Northbeam to see what trends, anomalies, or interesting findings we can uncover. Here every week, I keep it simple. I show you the data. I tell you kind of the top of mind stuff that we're noticing at Northbeam across our clients, or stuff that I'm seeing in the industry, right? This is our 19th installment. We're almost at our 20. And this week, we're talking a lot about Meta. A lot of us have had a tough week, week after last, and we're going to be looking at that today. So getting into it, budget share. This has stayed relatively stable, which is good to see. You always like to see Meta in between kind of 65 and 68. We've been on the higher end of this for a little while. Meta, for all of the problems that we've been having over the last, quarter, essentially, is what I'm hearing. Over the last quarter and a half since the start of the year, we've been having a tough time with Meta ads. At the same time, it's still the number one thing that I think is driving conversions. And when you see performance shifts, problems, data being dropped, breaks, overspending, whatever it may be on Meta, it has residual effects across all the other platforms in this spread, right? Especially Google. That Meta Google funnel is really, really strong. So anytime that you see Meta performance shifting, like it's going to affect everything else. But at the same time, it's not like there's a vast amount of people yanking their spend from Meta in response to what's been going on there, right? It's still the vast majority of the budget. Google's about 25 to 28% of that budget. For as much as we are excited about platforms like TikTok, YouTube, and even Pinterest, which is somebody that I have early bets on that I'm really hoping long-term can become something amazing, Meta is where it's at. It's where everyone is. It's where all the conversions happen. And that still hasn't changed this week. My favorite thing to say at this point is the moment it does change, this will be the first place you hear about it, right? Let's get straight into the auction and conversion metrics. Was talking about Meta. You could see a lot of red arrows this week on Meta. This is happening for, I think, a couple of different reasons. If you don't already know, Meta's launched something called Lattice, L-A-T-T-I-S-E, like a lattice like that, which is a new framework that they're using to organize all of their algorithms that they use for their media buying and spending. It's not a tool that you use or anything like that. It's just kind of the underlying framework that Meta is using to actually auction its ads. And we know for a fact that anytime that there's any sort of adjustment, update, whatever it may be to the algorithm, that's going to affect performance, partly on Meta's behalf, and also partly because our creative and the way we were shipping, organizing visualizing or creative hasn't caught up with what's working in the new algorithm shift, right? Even the tiniest changes can affect this performance. And what happened with Lattice was not a tiny change. We're talking about an entire restructure of the way that they're doing their algorithms. I'm not saying, or when we can't really know if that's the number one reason that this has happened, but we see constantly a correlation, if not causation, between the algorithmic shifts and meta performance. So CPMs are up. That's not a big deal. What is a big deal? CPCs are up 5%. Anything over 3 here is a big deal. So cost per clicks are way up. ROAS is way down on Meta. We have heard a lot of people having one-off complaints. Oh, I'm seeing overspending. My performance is tanking. Whereas other people are going, hey, I've had a great month, right? It's been kind of case by case basis, but if you're someone who's seeing wildly shifting performance in your Meta accounts, you're not alone. I would try and talk to your Meta reps about that. That can be even more challenging knowing that Meta is having a bunch of layoffs, right? It's wouldn't be unheard of if some of the changes, problems, the big bug that happened a couple of weeks ago were related to the way that the project management is happening over there. We don't know how many people have been laid off from that ads team or what has happened or how the work is being distributed or prioritized. Mistakes are going to happen, right, in any sort of restructure. And so that's to be expected. Unfortunately, as much as I would love to say, oh, we should protest, we should do this, we should do that, we are pretty dependent on Meta as advertisers. We need them. It's where we're shipping ads, it's where we have great conversions, it's where our customers are, it's where our customers are actually buying, right? Compared to something like TikTok or Pinterest, which is a much more challenging, I think, by the nature, one, of the algorithm, and two, of the structure of the placements themselves, much more challenging conversion metrics than what we see on Meta. So as much as I wish I could get on here and say, I have a magic solution for you to fix this, the reality is sometimes we have to grin and bear it, right? And I think the best thing that you can do is stay flexible, abandon any tradition that you might have about these ads have always worked, right? Most of you in this webinar know this, but we need to embrace an experimentation mindset where anytime you're like, well, why is this changing? Why is performance going badly? You need to be digging in and being like, what can we try that's new that could work for us, that could help us game the new algorithmic change, right? It's always worth it to not stick to something that maybe worked. If this worked, 6 months ago, a year ago, right? Let's just make a version of that and it'll work again, right? You need to trust your data, find what's working, and just follow that. The same can be said about what's going on TikTok, which is another spat of red arrows this week. One note on TikTok, the Montana TikTok ban, you need to read a little bit deeper than the headlines. It's not going to take place, I think, for like a year. It's not going to be enforced. And also, I would like to see how that would be enforced. I know they're doing, I think it was like $10,000 fines if you had TikTok on your phone. But once again, that would require someone to either report you or for your phone to be taken by law enforcement and have that checked and blah, blah, blah. I find it very difficult that we would be able, I would find it very difficult to actually enact any sort of ban on TikTok without action all the way up, I think, taken at like the app store level. There's really no other way you can really stop it. So I'm not as concerned about that Montana ban, which was kind of political theater anyway. But I would say if you are running ads in Montana, for whatever reason, take a look at that performance and keep an eye on what's going on there. Good news across the industry level, way more green arrows. This is a relief after what happened the week prior. I know we had a tough week of performance, but overall consumer spending is on the bounce. This is good for us. I wish I could say, oh, this is exactly happening. This is happening. When it comes to these big high industry level things, I look at macro here. I look at what's the macroeconomic effects of what's going on. We're finally starting to pass through the transition season. We're going to step into summer. We have Father's Day coming. We have 4th of July coming. The sun is out. For those of you on the East Coast, like weather is getting better. Consumers are going to be looking for new things, trying to buy new things, going to be planning for vacations, spring cleanings, all these sorts of things. Like we're kind of breaking out of our funk a little bit. And that rising tide is going to raise all ships, right? Baby is back on the bounce. Apparel and fashion is back up again. Health and wellness has recovered from its normal like resolutioner type run into, oh, we're getting into the good, like let's go outdoors and run season. So health and wellness is back on the up as well. Google category budget shares. No major changes here. I know we had a big shift last week. The only thing worth noting is now that PMAX is kind of back over 40, but that's not a big deal compared to what we usually see. Shopping has been trying to break 10% of the budget share for a while now. I think that our guests may have something to say about what works and what doesn't work. So I'll save the pontification, which is our favorite word, for when he and I start chatting. Finally, I think the last word I have to say on this, it was a tough week for Meta that didn't necessarily translate into a tough week sales-wise for everybody. But if you are having problems on Meta, you are not alone. Things are in transition over there. There's turmoil going on. It's still our favorite platform to sell on, our favorite platform to advertise on. We're in it with Meta for the long haul. If you are having problems, you are likely not alone. I've heard reports over and over and over again of instead of widespread, consistent problems like the overspending bug that we had a while back, I've heard issues about conversion rates tanking 30, 40, 50%. I've heard about CPMs doubling or tripling on one day and then going back down and going back up. Lots of things are changing over there. If you have a Meta rep, get yourself one. If you don't, try and talk to them. Talk to your rep, see if you could understand what's going on. They'd have visibility across accounts, including accounts similar to yours, which is why a lot of people are on this call. They want that cross, I want to hear how everyone else is doing, right? Your rep can speak to you directly and understand if you are affected by some sort of bug, if the issue that you're running into is localized to you, or if it's localized to, say, your industry, or if it's actually related to what's happening in the algorithm and your ads themselves. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't. I would seek out peer groups. I love Foxwell Founders Group, for example, which is a great place to talk about performance media. It's a great place to talk about what's going on, communicate with each other, and help each other. And frankly, that's what we need at this time, right? If you're not getting the feedback that you need from Meta because they're going through a lot, then you should seek out friends, mentors, other connections, peers in the industry that you can chat with and try and get through this stuff, right? At the same time, I think the bottom line is here, ads are going to get more expensive than ever. It's not going to stop. It's going to keep getting worse and worse and worse. I think the number one thing you can do, which I know I'm a broken record about this and all of the things you see me write and talk about on these webinars, is to focus on profitability in your ads. I think if you're not focusing on profitability, if you're not focusing on, what am I getting out of my one day? Are these campaigns profitable? Are they not? And finding some way to understand that and measure that, which sounds fundamental, but you'd be surprised. If you're not prioritizing profitability in the short term, you're going to have a really hard time keeping up with these ever increasing CPMs, which are, anywhere from 20 to 50% more expensive than they were even just 2 or 3 years ago. So if you're somebody, let's say running, I'd say less than $100,000 a month Facebook ads right now, it will be scary. It will feel weird to cut back on your revenue and focus on your profitability in your ads. But in the long run, your business is going to be a lot healthier and your ad account is going to be a lot healthier. You're not going to have to go through this problem of staring at it every week and being like, is this worth it for me? Right. And I know that's what we do here at Northbeam, is help you understand that. So if you're on this call, you still don't have Northbeam, please give me a call. Let's do this. Let's get you on the right path. I think we are just now, maybe we have been for the last 18 months or so, still standing at the bottom of the mountain in terms of how high CPMs and the cost of advertising is going to rise. I think it's only going to get more expensive on these conversion heavy platforms like Facebook. You are not seeing subsidizing of these platforms anymore. TikTok still has yet to turn a profit. Twitter needs to turn a profit with its ad accounts. They're going to be, with their new CEO coming in, they're going to be trying to attract in a ton more big, legacy brand spend, which is going to lift the price of the auction for everyone else. So we are just now, I think, looking up the mountain of how expensive this stuff is going to get. We are just getting started. So if you haven't shifted, I think, the paradigm of your ad account over to profitability as the number one measure of every single ad and every single campaign that you run, now is the best time to start. A year ago would have been even better, but today's the next best thing. So with that, let's switch gears. Today, I'd like to welcome somebody that I've known for a while, has been a constant guest or a constant visitor in our webinars. Zack, who is the head of Google at Homestead, which is an agency that we love here at Northbeam, has worked with some great, fantastic clients. I mean, hundreds of millions in ad spend. And Zack is a pro at our Google ads. He's a pro using Northbeam for Google ads. And we're going to keep this casual today, but what we are going to do is talk about what's working in our Google ads, what you're seeing, Zack, and tips and tricks for actually digging into this stuff in Northbeam. I think a lot of people are really skilled at using Northbeam for the performance marketing experimentation, but we don't talk a whole lot about it on the Google side. So I'm excited to get into that. So I'm going to bring up Northbeam. We're going to actually get into an anonymized account. So this is going to be exciting. But Zack, thanks for coming on.
What's up, Brian? Thanks for having me. Like you said before, I tune in every week and I like to pay attention to what's going on in the industry. What's happening in my book that might also be happening across the space. So it's really good to have this as a resource. And, like you mentioned, the community around it, Twitter, LinkedIn, it's just a really great place to ask questions and stay current. So happy to share what I'm seeing this week.
All
Did
right,
I
I think
freeze
I
or
was.
did you freeze?
It's hard to tell. I can't tell who's freezing, but we're gonna keep trying. I think it's gonna work here. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and get into Northbeam. Zack, tell me a little bit about the kind of brands you work with, first of all, the kind of budgets you work with, and how you use Northbeam in relation to your Google ads.
Sure. So a lot of the brands we have at Homestead, they lead with paid social like most others in this space. So you've got any kind of brands from apparel, health and fitness type of products, some CPG, beauty brands. There's a really good mix. But the thing they all have in common is they lead with paid social, right? Like a lot of these aren't products where the journey starts with comparison, like you might see with furniture. We have some of them too, but a lot of these are paid social first brands, and that's where they're driving a lot of awareness. So that's where Google's really tricky because for most of these brands, it's inner funnel traffic. And because of that, it's really easy to either bid too much or too little on that traffic. So Northbeam is a really, really good tool that pulls everything into one place. And we can see that overlap and understand, hey, maybe we need to pull back budget here because we're paying too much per click or something like that.
That totally makes sense. So tell me a little bit about when you're running Google Ads campaigns, where does Northbeam fit in your process? To walk me through your process and when you're checking Northbeam, and then we'll talk a little bit about the metrics you're checking and kind of like what you're considering is good and what's bad and what's something you need to keep an eye on. Yeah.
Of course. So like everyone else, we're looking at 1-day click primarily, right? Like if you're seeing good 1-day click, everything else is going to go with it. That's where we have these LTV metrics to help. There's other windows you can look at too. But one of the first things I look at is paid social spend. Is that going up? Is that going down? That helps me give an idea of what's coming next, because typically if your paid social spend is going down, your Google spend is going with it. From there, the next thing I like to do is in this view that you're in now, I like to select Google Ads, and I also like to select organic search. So I'll actually grab the checkbox on those.
Cool.
And then go into campaign view. This gives me the ability to see both organic traffic and ad spend. So a lot of times what happens is Google ad accounts will scale up, but you won't really see extra revenue coming in. And a lot of times what happens is you're just bidding on keywords that you're already ranking really high for organically. So, and these are, again, people that already know the brand typically. They've already seen you on Facebook ads. So what happens is you end up just buying extra traffic and driving up your Google ad. I mean, I cut back accounts sometimes 50% all the time. And when you look at this view here that has organic and paid, the revenue stays pretty flat. So if you scroll up to that time series and you add spend and revenue here, the idea is that if you're increasing spend, your revenue should be going up too from this view. That way, it's a very clear way to say that, I'm not buying my organic traffic that I was already going to get for free. So this is one of the first things I really like to look at. Um, Again, and then I'll go deeper into the ad groups in a minute. But does that make sense? Does that sound good with you?
Yeah. I mean, the number one complaint I get when I start thinking about, oh, we need to run some Google ads is, but we're buying, we're buying traffic we were already going to get anyway. It's a waste of money, right? Um, if you're auditing an account, or let's say there's somebody on this call who wants to take this and look at their own account right now and say, how can I run a test to know, if I'm buying my own ads, what sort of quick test or what sort of test can somebody run, in the short term to say, I want to see if I'm actually buying a bunch of organic. I want to see if I can actually cut back on the spend. Like, what is there a quick way to do that?
Yeah, so this view is great because you can just look at historic spend and see, if spend went up, what happened. But you could also, one, you could try to scale something that looks like it has potential, and you'll be able to see right away if it's working or not. Run it for 2 weeks. If you see revenue go up from this view with organic and paid, that means it worked. On the other side, you could do a holdout and just cut a campaign type or something specific, maybe even the whole platform, and that'll give you a really good indication. I did this recently with one of the brands where the brand owner wanted to test if we could scale it. So we cranked budgets, we tripled them. The chart was flat. So now like we have a
Mhm.
really good idea of where we want to keep spend for that brand. And it's helped us maintain the account for the last 7, 8 months, just making sure we're not overspending here and we can bias the traffic towards acquisition.
What sort of time frame do you look at? Because sometimes people are expecting like immediate results. When you run a holdout like that, or you run let's just throw fuel on the fire and see what happens. What's the time frame there? How long do you let that run usually?
Yeah, I mean, it totally depends on the brand. It totally depends on seasonality. But that's where I like to look at the overview tab for some insight first, because if you have a product with like a serious time lag, like this one doesn't have a serious time lag, right? Like you could see there's not much color on that chart. Most of the sales
Yeah.
are 1 day click. So you can get results pretty quick and understand, I would say even 2 week period of time, you should know. But some of these brands, like half that bar is colored LTV, and that impact, you may need to run that for a lot longer, or maybe you need to get a little bit more creative with what you're looking at. So it's not as clear when some of these products just have really, really long purchase windows. um, but yeah, I mean, it really depends on the brand. Like I said, I like to look at this to help give some insight into where to look and what to do.
Yeah, I want to I want to talk about this just for a second because I think a lot of people see this chart and they don't fully understand like the magnitude of what's happening here. Like the vast majority of the LTV coming from brands here, it's on their first purchase. It's 1 day, right? Whether it's their first or not, like we can look at something like this. Yeah, I mean it's all new customer revenue, right? Like I don't care what kind of brand you have, whoever's in the audience here, like I don't care what kind of brand you have. Go look at this in like very serious detail. Look at this and then look at your LTV tabs, like, and really dig in and try and understand, oh, okay, where exactly is that coming from? And I think some people get really surprised. I'm gonna snap back over to the sales tab. Let's talk about some of the metrics that you look at because I've heard it all at this point. I've heard everybody uses whatever they like for whatever sort of very specific business practice they have. Tell me about the metrics that you like, and I'll bring up the Google Ads campaign here. Um,
Sure. And before you get too far, can you change the overview to detailed? I'll give you the same view that I look
yeah,
at.
let's see.
Yeah, detailed, and then you could stay here. Go to customize and just drag customize columns. Drag percent new visits. It's in like the mid to the bottom. Just drag that up above ROAS, and
Oh man, we got everything in here. Here it is.
right, yeah, there it is. So right up above ROAS. So this is one of the first things I look at. Like we mentioned, for most brands, with this being interfunnel traffic, like we want to bias towards new. So this is a really good tool to help. So you could see with this particular brand, like they have a lot of Amazon business going on, but if you look at Facebook and Google, 84% for Facebook, 81% for Google. So this is just something interesting to keep in mind. Pull up Google and we can look at some of these campaigns.
This brand is really in the growth phase, huh?
Oh yeah,
That's great. All right.
yeah, this is a good one. So looking at these percent new visits, right? Like you can already tell which one's probably branded search or retargeting campaign, even though they're hashed and that information's not here. So this right here is super insightful for just knowing one, like traffic segmentation is really important still. Like, everyone talks about performance max and how that's the future. I think it is the future, but right now, from what I'm seeing, segmenting your campaigns by intent is still really important. Another indicator of that is if you move over to the right a little bit so you can see CPCs. Here we go. So that second one right there, if you could just check the box so it's highlighted for everybody.
This one.
Yeah, so this one's getting 17-cent CPCs. And if you go back over to see the ROAS on this is last 7. Compared to the other campaigns in here, like this is performing really strong. It's spending a lot too. So how do you get 17-cent CPCs in Google Ads and still get good ROAS? This is where traffic segmentation is so important. So basically, what I've done is here we have non-brand campaigns running, but they're split into 2. I like to call them bottom funnel and top of funnel. So bottom funnel is all like your product terms, right? Like anything that has really high purchase intent. But top of funnel is people that are maybe interested in buying, but they don't know what they need. They're asking questions.
Mhm.
So what you do is you, on that blog post, on that landing page, address the problems that they may be having when they're searching for these questions. And now you position your product as the solution to those problems. So what happens is nobody's bidding on these terms. Like that's all SEO land. This is just open. There's inventory. There's no one paying for it. The CPCs are really low. This isn't the only account I'm seeing this in either. So just to give you an example, I wrote down some keywords. Can you pull up Google in another tab? And if you could just search cat food as an example. So this is very clearly bottom funnel, right? Like there's 4 ads above the fold. You have the shopping ads right there. Like if you scroll down, now you've got all the organic listings showing up. There isn't a blog about anything anywhere. Collection pages organically. Like the CPCs on this are going to be through the friggin' roof. Like
I mean, it's Amazon, Walmart, Petco. Like, how you can't listen if you're like a small organic cat food brand, you can't even try
you're not
and list
penetrating that.
here. There's no
Yeah,
way.
you're not doing it. And that's where like broad match has helped, right? Like it's kind of leveled the playing field a little bit for smaller brands to get in, but you have to know how to work it. So the next keyword search, is cat food safe?
Safe for humans.
Just safe, yeah. Now you'll see like a lot of weird stuff show up here, right? Like can humans eat it? So you got to check, right? Like this may not be one you'd necessarily want to bid on, but you could. And look,
Sure.
there's no one bidding for this. So do you write about humans or like the ingredients in it? Well, take it a step further and search what is in cat food. I mean, you can see
These
like
are like this is
gold
this is
mine.
nothing. This is nobody. That's I mean, Wikipedia is showing up here.
So organically, you're not going to rank there. But if I'm getting CPCs at 15 cents, there's a lot of opportunity here because now I can use this to position my product in that blog post and say, I have this really good cat food that's maybe better than some of these big brands, or I have better humane practices, or use better quality, whatever your unique value prop is. Now you have a great opportunity to say it, and the CPCs are really, really low because again, no one's bidding here.
And so what do you run? What do you run in this spot? I know you're saying like, oh, let's run a blog post or let's run a landing page. Is it a product detail page? Is it one of those like landing pages where it's kind of a blog post, and then at the bottom we have the product. Is it a pure blog post where it's not even supposed to look like a selly thing? What exactly are you running in that spot on these kind of keywords?
So the first thing we did here is we reverse engineered Google, right? Like we looked at our terms and said, what's showing up on here? So to take that a step further, open up like 3 of these, and you're going to learn what people expect to see when they search these terms. So for example, that first one there, if you just open it in a new tab on the Google search results, this is what Google's favoring. So it's just a regular blog post, right? Like this is what they're ranking on the first page because this is what people expect to see. So you just take that approach of reverse engineering what's working the same way SEOs do and have been doing for years, and just apply that to your paid media strategy. So
Yeah.
you're going to see in the next couple of years with a lot of media buying automation happening that there's going to be this blur of SEOs and paid media specialists where they start to become one and the same. That one, same thing, blog. So the question you asked is like, what do you do? Well, you meet people where they're at, right? Like if they're looking for information, provide them with information. If they're looking to buy something, give them something to buy, but don't break that user experience, right? Like if you start slamming product pages on here, it's not going to work. I've tried it. I tried it years ago.
Yeah.
But what does work now is taking that conversion bidding and getting that high purchase intent traffic that's doing a little bit of research, and slam them with the information, introduce them to your brand, and lock them down there with really good inline hyperlinks. You
Hmm.
can put whatever pictures you want in here because it's your blog. And this is what these guys are doing too. They're just not buying this traffic because they're already ranking high. So, this is a really good opportunity for people that maybe don't have a large brand like one of these guys, or haven't really invested too much in SEO, to incorporate this into their content budget, their content strategy, and get like really cheap traffic that pays the bills.
And at the end of the day, I'm willing to bet that if you're some, in this specific case, if you're some, let's say, gourmet small batch cat food provider, your whole team is full of people who have way too much knowledge about cat food and are like the perfect people to, I'll be like, write me a blog post. I wouldn't even want to say like entirely turn this over to ChatGPT or some sort of chatbot, because I'm like, we have some sort of very specific thing to say as well about cat food and what's wrong, and what problem we solve or whatever. Like that's the whole reason for the purpose of the company. It does shine a light on your brand. If your brand is kind of like just undercutting, or if you don't have like, I think, a really strong brand position or like reason for the brand to exist, it's a problem that it solves, you can struggle with this strategy. But like if you were somebody who was like, beef tallow is bad, you can write 100 blog posts like focusing on this right here and bring it up in these search terms. So once again, I mean, it's another case. We see this over and over and over. It's another case of marketing where people are at, where the competition is not, which is like a consistent trend that we see over and over and over. Now, the problem is like starting a blog is kind of a daunting task. When it comes to making something that works for this strategy, like you don't have to make a huge blog. You don't have to publish every single day or anything like that. You could literally have 2 or 3 posts and just have that, right? You don't have to launch some sort of news agency, right?
Well, so generally how it works is, because what we like to do is we like to put everything in one campaign. What that does is combines all the available searches for all the available keywords into one gigantic audience. So this is that campaign. There's like 40 ad groups in here, something like that. They all have different bids. And we bias the bids to put money into what's getting the highest ROAS and the highest percent new visits. So generally, like more is better here. Now, how do you
Mhm.
produce the content at scale? Like this is what we're testing right now at Homestead. And just to give you some insight into the process and what I've been seeing, um, going back to GPT-4, right? Like when you just look at search in general, it's not like other advertising where you're trying to interrupt someone's day And there's this whole concept of pattern interrupt. So like YouTube, it's the sound that catches people. On Facebook, it's the visuals that catch people. Like on search, the pattern interrupt is more about satisfying the search, right? Like being helpful, answering the questions, making sure that you've given someone what they wanted. So when it comes down to this kind of content, what's always worked in SEO is the same goal of something like Chat GPT, which is create the most average content, right? Like don't get fancy, don't do journalism, don't try to like spin them in 100 direct, just answer their question. So like with Chat GPT, where it works really well is you could just say, answer this question, and it'll give you all the information. You could even say cite your sources, inline hyperlinks, and you'll get like a whole bunch of stuff that just supports the article. So right there, like 50-60% of it's done. You fact check it, let the brand QA it, put their unique expertise in there, like you were talking about earlier. And then you've got some really good content that's very low cost to produce. And like I said, that's what we're testing out now is how do we produce that at scale so we can get like, 20, 30 ad groups in a new campaign that no one's bidding on for terms that no one's bidding on that are just super relevant.
And I mean, like that, this cost per click, I mean, this is crazy.
Yeah, I've never
Like,
seen this before.
this is crazy. Like, sure, the ROAS is not that much different than what's happening over here, right? But in terms of just sheer eyeballs, like
Yeah,
that's unbeatable. And the people who are clicking this like are going to appear, if they, for example, they show up in your Facebook campaigns later, like they're going to get tracked back to this, and you're going to be able to say, I remember we did hit them with that first top of funnel, like, hey, this is who we are. The first introduction to our brand, our imagery, our product, whatever it happens to be, happened really cheap, which is harder and harder and harder. And I think a lot of people turn to organic, but if you have something that's like, I mean, cat food's easy because if you wanted to make organic, here I am saying cat food's easy, I'm having never sold it, but like,
I'm not starting
if
that
you,
brand.
yeah, right. Like if you wanted to make organic content, it's easy. You've got cats, and those are always great. There's visual communities dedicated to looking at cat videos all over the internet. It's kind of the whole reason the internet exists, right? So like that's kind of easier, but some brands can't actually get an organic traction off of any sort of organic social. It's all these like searches, right? Some things aren't sexy enough to put in a TikTok ad. Say they aren't interesting enough to run an Instagram account about, or they're so niche that there aren't those digital communities. With this, you're diving right in and getting that long tail. Now, how many of these, when it comes to identifying the searches you want to target and stuff, how many do you run at a time? Is there a maximum sort of coverage? Is it a case by case study each keyword? Like how many of these do you run? How many would you recommend? Is there too many, too little?
As
Does it
much as
matter?
possible, as much as you possibly can. And we try not to pause any ad groups. We just like set that target ROAS really high to the point where they're either going to be profitable or they'll just scale down. And if they stay off for a long time, right, like just zero for a month or two, then we'll pause them so they don't just come back from the dead out of nowhere, blow a bunch of
Mhm.
budget. But yeah, generally like you want like a really big audience because with how this ad delivery works, it's all predictive, right? So the more data you have available for this algorithm to snipe at, the better. And in this case, the data is potential searches, right? So you want to use broad match, as many different terms as possible. And how you set the ad groups up is you theme them very tight. So we might have like what is in cat food, exact phrase, broad match keywords, and then those all different weird versions of that same question come up. You try to throw them in there as more exact match keywords to try to push more spend towards those terms because we know they're going to be profitable. We can see in the search terms report if they're getting conversions or not. So then as you get like more specific keywords coming through, like organic cat food, like what is in organic cat food, organic versus non-organic cat food, right? Like you give them separate places, and sometimes they may even go to the same article, but now you have the opportunity to bid differently on them, which makes a world of difference here. So it's really just about keeping your ad groups tight so that you can manage bids and control your spend that way, but also broad where now you can use the account to find all the new keywords for you. So what I like to do is run a dynamic search campaign, just the whole website. And that's how I started figuring this out, because I started seeing info keywords working that never worked before. And I was like, oh, they're going to blogs. Like, okay, this never used to work. So then, I'm looking through the brands. Some of them have really good blogs. They clearly had an SEO at one point. So I was like, all right, like we like to segment traffic by intent. So this is like very low intent traffic. Let's pull it out. Let's bid on it separately. Let's still use conversion bidding, because we know that's the goal there is to make money. And it started working. So I started testing it on other brands that had strong blogs, and it was like, all right, hey, we're looking at something here that's got a lot of potential. So let's start building the process around it, see what we can do.
And I mean, the data doesn't lie here. It's like, it's working, right? I'm seeing fantastic numbers like all through here, and I'm seeing all sorts of stuff that you're testing. Like this is great. I know these are hash, but like fantastic stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
I think parting notes here, because we're way over time, but it's been great chatting with you. Parting notes. What's your number one piece of advice for people in the D2C space who are running Google ads right now? What's the number one thing you think that people should know that maybe they don't listen to or haven't heard that often?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to what we spoke about first, right? Like, take a look at your organic traffic, take a look at your paid traffic, make sure they're not cannibalizing each other. Like Northbeam is a really great place to look at this. If you don't have Northbeam, you can stitch together some last click insights from Google Analytics as best you can. But really, like, I would say try to avoid any dogma around things like branded search, because for some brands it matters a lot, for some brands it doesn't. That's where I usually see a lot of overspending, because you end up getting these brand terms and non-brand budgets get blown up. You just turn them off and revenue stays the same. So really, like, if you're not sure how to approach this, what to do, you just need some help, reach out to Homestead. We could take a look at your account. We could see if you might be a good fit to work with us, and we can go from there.
Yeah, what's Homestead's website again?
It's homesteadstudio.co. There's a contact form. And just say
Fantastic.
you heard about us on the Northbeam webinar and you're interested, you want to chat, you want some help.
Zach, thank you so much for being on here, man. I think this is a fantastic thing that now that we've gone and said it, everyone's going to be out there trying it, right? That's my
Yep.
hope and dream. So, but thank you so much for being on the webinar. For those of you who are here, thanks for sticking it out with us, hanging out with us. If you have any questions at all, tweet at me, tweet at Zach, tweet at Northbeam, and get a hold of Homestead. They're one of Northbeam's preferred partners. They'd be happy to have you and teach you all about Northbeam and help scale your business. Once again, thanks for joining the Media Buyer webinar. I will see you all next week. Zach, thanks for joining, and we'll talk soon, bud.
Thanks for having me.